The Dallas Cowboys finished the 2024 season with a 7-10 record and missed the playoffs for the first time since 2020. It was a very difficult season for the Cowboys as they entered the year with legitimate postseason aspirations. I know a lot of people like to dunk on the Cowboys, and their fan base is notorious for saying this is the year, but to the Cowboys' credit, this was the only team from 2021 through 2023 to win 12 games in every season. The Chiefs didn't do it, the Bills didn't do it, nobody else but Dallas did, and unfortunately both injury and poor performance were the main reasons Dallas had a below 500 record for the first time since 2020. Quarterback Dak Prescott was on pace for the worst season of his career, as he had a career high in interception percentage as well as a career low in completion percentage, and the team was just 3-5 in the 8 games he played in 2024. The Cowboys were eventually outscored a combined 68-16 in weeks 10 and 11 by the Eagles and Texans, which put them at 3-7, and with how loaded the NFC was last year, as remember the 7-seed Packers had 11 wins, that essentially ended the Cowboys season. They would go on to win 4 of their next 5 games to improve to 7-8 through 15, but eventually lost in weeks 17 and 18 to the Eagles and Commanders, and Trey Lance actually started the week 18 game against Washington, and in a lot of ways, the Cowboys 2024 season is best forgotten. But as we enter the 2025 season, I have one big concern with the Dallas Cowboys, and today's video marks the start of the 2025 NFL Team Preview Series. And before we start, if you could like the video, I'd really appreciate it, as there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin! The format of the team previews will generally be off-season additions via free agency, the draft, and of course in Dallas's case, one big trade while also reviewing what went wrong during the 2024 season. And within that we will also break down the structure of the roster and where this team internally thinks they are heading into the year. So having said that, we are starting today's video by discussing what they did in free agency. And I think the common theme with the Cowboys in free agency this year, as weird as this strategy was signing or acquiring a lot of former first-round picks. And generally when a player is referred to as a former first-round pick, they are usually a draft disappointment or in some cases a flat-out draft bust, and I have no problem with throwing a dart at a former first-round pick to see if there's anything there. They signed multiple former first-round picks, and my favorite of the former first-round selections they signed was veteran Dante Fowler Jr. Fowler is coming off of a 10.5 sack season with Washington and is coming back to Dallas as he played for the Cowboys in 2022 and 2023. Fowler had 44 pressures for Washington last year, and that was the second most he had in his career, as he had a 67 pressure season back in 2019 with the Rams, which was the most in his career by far, and generally speaking, Fowler is a 35 to 40 pressure per year guy. One of the reasons I like the Fowler signing was because of the message that we're going to emphasize all throughout the 2025 team preview series, and it's that you can never have enough pass rush. I really thought Sam Williams was going to take a step in 2024 and be a legitimate Robin to Micah's Batman, but unfortunately Williams tore his ACL in July of last year and his season was over before it started. I was also very high on their second round pick this year in Boston College pass rusher Donovan Ezaraku, and I think Ezaraku is going to be in the league for a long time, and I thought he was a first round talent, and that Dallas had a draft steal in the middle of the second round. And the reason we bring those guys up with Dante Fowler is, in some ways, I hope Fowler has a minimized role in 2025, because it would mean that Sam Williams, Donovan Ezaraku, or even 2024 second rounder Marshawn Kneeland all did their job, or that one of them legitimately broke out and became the second pass rusher Dallas needs behind Micah Parsons. But in the worst case, and this is still a good worst case scenario to have, Dante Fowler should be a solid player in his role. Solomon Thomas is a depth player, and I was kind of surprised they gave him a 2-year contract for who he is as a player at this point in his career, but Solomon is a really good guy for the locker room and should have a sparing role. He is not a very good player, and ultimately there is a reason he signed for an average annual value of just $3 million. He played under current Cowboys defensive line coach Aaron Whitecotton with the Jets last year, and Solomon should not be expected to be anything more than veteran depth at this point. He misses a lot of tackles, he gets washed out regularly in the run game, but can occasionally get after the quarterback. If Osa Odighizuwa goes down with injury and misses significant time this year, then I really worry about the position Dallas is going to be in during the 2025 season. They also gave Saints 2021 first-round pick Peyton Turner $2 million guaranteed, and Peyton Turner played less than 700 career snaps with the Saints in 4 years and has 5 career sacks with 0 career starts. He may make the roster due to the money they guaranteed him, but with all of the guys ahead of him, and especially the young talent Dallas has along the defensive line, I really don't expect much of anything from Peyton Turner this year. The two moves that kind of surprised me Dallas made was trading for both Kenneth Murray and Kaiir Elam. Kenneth Murray was a first-round pick back in 2020 with the Chargers, and Murray is an extremely frustrating player to watch. He regularly misses gaps or opportunities to make plays, and he is the definition of a good athlete, but not great football player. For reference, he tested in the 89th percentile in the 40 back in 2020, as well as the 86th percentile in the vertical, and even the 95th percentile in the broad jump. He's a tremendous athlete, but does not have the instincts other linebackers do, and it shows up regularly. I don't want to completely kill this move and say that it's awful, because Dallas can cut him at any time for minimal financial implications, and if he works out, then you swapped a couple of day 3 picks and got a starter for it, which is a trade any team would make at any point. I also think it's worth noting that the Cowboys defensive coordinator is Matt Eberflus, and while Eberflus may be remembered most for the Thanksgiving Day blunder against the Lions last year, he is back where he's most comfortable, which is being a defensive coordinator. Dallas also finished 31st in points allowed per game last year, as well as 30th in rushing yards per attempt against, and dead last in rushing touchdowns allowed, and I do think Dallas's defense will be significantly improved from where they were in 2024. The Kaiir Elam trade was another late-round pick swap, and Dallas's defense heading into 2025, on paper, is a really solid unit. I really like the corner room in Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, and rookie Savone Ravel, and even Kaiir Elam for depth. The biggest thing for Dallas in 2025 is going to be able to consistently stop the run, which is what got them in trouble a lot during the 2024 season. And ultimately, this is where they're going to need 2023 first-round pick Mazi Smith to step up. For most of Mazi Smith's first year and a half, he looked like the interior defensive line version of Taco Charlton and looked like a draft bust. Now, I don't think Mazi is on the path to becoming a Pro Bowler, but I do want to acknowledge that he showed some improvement down the stretch of 2024, and we often talk about how it takes trench players time to develop because of the transition phase from going against collegiate players in the trenches to legit grown men in the trenches every single week, and I do think in a lot of ways this is a now or never year for Mazi Smith. In terms of situations around a said player, not just with Mazi Smith, but with a lot of other players along this defensive line, these guys are all set up for success. Micah Parsons' presence helps out a lot of guys, and as simple as this idea and concept is, it's ultimately on Mazi Smith and the interior defensive line to not get pushed around the way they did at times last year. We will talk about 7th round pick Jay Toya a little more during the rookie portion of the preview, but I do have some hope for him and think he can contribute a bit in his rookie season, despite being a 7th round selection. Now, there are a few things to note within the Cowboys' run defense in 2025 that I think will naturally limit how good they can be, and the big thing, or two big things, is that they play in the same division as the Eagles and Washington Commanders, and having a near quarter of your schedule against two elite running teams is going to hurt your chances of being a top 3 or top 5 run defense, period. But despite finishing the year 7-10 last year, the Cowboys had several blowout losses, and obviously in a blowout loss, the opposing team is going to run the football, which happened in every game they were down, and not surprisingly, Dallas allowed over 140 yards rushing in every game. They lost by 10 or more last year. And the biggest concerns I have with the Cowboys defense entering 2025 is the linebacking play outside of DeMarvion Overshown, who we of course hope comes back healthy, as he unfortunately tore his ACL, MCL, and PCL last year. I'm not a doctor, I don't claim to be a doctor, but I really hope Overshown can come back and play at full strength. Technically, you could also add him to a concern with the Cowboys linebacking play, especially if he doesn't come back healthy, but for the sake of this team preview and for the sake of DeMarvion Overshown, we are hoping he comes back healthy. I did want to acknowledge the possibility of him not coming back healthy, but you get the point. The linebacking core outside of him is really thin, and I also have concerns at nickel, as Jordan Lewis signed with Jacksonville in free agency, who played over 600 snaps in the slot last year. What Dallas's goal is defensively is to stop the run early on 1st and 2nd down, to set up 3rd and long situations, and to have guys like Micah Parsons, Donovan Ezaraku, Dante Fowler, and Sam Williams get after the quarterback, and have the ball-hawking corners in Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland speed, jump routes, and play an aggressive style of defense. And when it works, they really pounce on teams, and we saw that in 2023 as they had several wins by double digits. I expect the Cowboys to work out a contract with Micah Parsons at some point, and unfortunately Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs only played a combined 18 of 34 games last year, but if this defense can stay healthy, then they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. They finished 5th in points allowed per game in 2023 and 31st in points allowed per game in 2024. And while some changes on the roster have been made over the past 2 years, this team is far too talented to be 31st in points allowed per game and to allow 27 points of 9 of 17 games the way they did last year. And if you were wondering, Dallas was 0-9 in those games. For the 2025 NFL Team Preview Series, we will be doing a rookie impact for every team, and not every team received the draft grade the Cowboys did. I gave them an A draft grade as I really liked what they did with their first 3 selections by bringing in Alabama guard Tyler Booker, Boston College pass rusher Donovan Ezeraku, and ECU corner Savone Revel. I will go ahead and get ahead of one thing that I did have Tyler Booker at player 35 on my big board, and they selected him at player 12, so there is a minus 23 value difference there, but I did have Donovan Ezeraku at spot 17 on my big board, and they selected him at 44. So if you kind of want to do the mental adjustment of, hey, just picture Ezeraku as their first round pick and Booker as their second, by all means go for it, but I really like the fit with all 3 players, and especially Booker and Ezeraku. Booker is a player that I don't want to say is set up for failure because that's really strong wording, but I think he's inevitably set up to kind of let fans down, at least initially, because he has a job that is going to be difficult for anyone, let alone a 21-year-old rookie, and that is to replace future Hall of Famer Zach Martin. Zach Martin was a 7-time first-team All-Pro, including a first-team All-Pro in his rookie year back in 2014, and for any Cowboys fans out there expecting that, hey, this is going to be a very smooth transition, this is basically going to be the Stephon Diggs to Justin Jefferson of the guard position, please do not expect that, because that is inevitably setting Tyler Booker up to let you down. Tyler Booker is a really good guard prospect, or he was a good guard prospect, and I think he will be a good player for the Cowboys in the long run. But what is important to note is he is a player that needs to play within a phone booth, if you will. If he were to ever kick out the tackle, that would not be good for Tyler Booker, as I do have questions surrounding his foot speed. But positively, I do want to say that a lot of Alabama players compared him to the Will Anderson of the offense from a leadership standpoint, and anytime you have a player that is viewed as a leader, a guy to look up to in the locker room, to me is only a positive, and I do think Tyler Booker will be a starter for the Cowboys for not just a year or two, but really for the next 4 or 5 years and potentially even longer. He is a 21-year-old rookie, so there will undoubtedly be times where he's getting seasoned in the NFL, especially if he has to play Jalen Carter or Dexter Lawrence early on, and especially if they give him one-on-one situations where there's no help inside. That would be a tough draw for Tyler Booker, but that's the reality of playing in the NFL. Ultimately, I really did like the Booker landing spot, and a lot of the time that's what it is in the pre-draft process, is marrying a position of need with a player that fits the value along the board, and I thought the Cowboys did a sufficient job with that with Tyler Booker. Donovan Ezeraku going to Dallas was one of my favorite landing spots in the entire draft, because I looked at this as a first-round pass rushing prospect going to be the Robin to Micah Parsons Batman, and I'll be honest, I would not be surprised at all, barring playing time of course, because if he can't beat out Dante Fowler or Sam Williams or Marshawn Nealon, then that is an entirely different discussion, but I would not be surprised at all if Donovan Ezeraku isn't the Defensive Rookie of the Year conversation. I really think there's a reality where he has a 35 or 40 pressure type season, maybe even more depending on how many pass rushing snaps he receives, and has 6.5 or 7.5 or 8 sacks as a rookie in 2025, which to me would put him in the Defensive Rookie of the Year conversation. I love Ezeraku. I think his ceiling is as high as he wants it to be, and he is in a tremendous situation for himself because of having Micah Parsons and even Osa Odigizua along the defensive line, meaning that he will never be the priority in terms of getting after the quarterback, and he will be set up with a lot of one-on-one situations, which he destroyed the competition during his final year at BC in 2024. Savone Revel was a 24-year-old corner coming off of a torn ACL, so naturally he was not going to be for everyone, but he's 6'2", 195 pounds, and can jam receivers at the line, and I really love the idea of having a physical corner at the line of scrimmage in this defense, especially with the emphasis that Dallas has on pass rush. Outside of the first 3 selections, I wasn't the biggest fan of what Dallas did in the 2025 draft, and with Jaden Blue and Phil Maffa, I thought there were better running backs available, and ultimately that what to me was one of the biggest positions of need for the Cowboys entering entering the 2025 draft, and I don't think Jaden Blue and Phil Maffa are going to be the answers. And I didn't really like the Phil Maffa selection in particular because I like Damian Martinez a lot, who was selected earlier in the 7th round, and if you were going to select a running back in the 7th round, why not select a better player in Damian Martinez? Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and kill Phil Maffa as a prospect because he was a 7th round selection that ultimately I liked a player that I had in my top 100 in Damian Martinez who went to Seattle, but the point is I thought Dallas could have handled the running back position better in the draft than they did. Now for Jay Toia, the defensive lineman from UCLA, he is a big-bodied defensive tackle, and I really like the idea of having him and Mazi Smith both along the interior defensive line on early downs, and basically saying to opposing offenses, good luck trying to run on us, and you're going to have to run the ball outside if you want to get anywhere against this defense, which was much needed, especially after what the Cowboys defense went through in 2024. Overall, I thought the Cowboys did a tremendous job in the top 100 of the 2025 draft, and I do have some questions with the rest of their draft class, but whenever you can walk out of a class with what were, to me, 3 top 41 players in a class, you are doing a tremendous job as an organization, and I think there's a very real reality that Dallas walked out of this class with at least 3 starters in Tyler Booker, Donovan Ezaraku, and Savone Revel. Now, I do think the Cowboys defense will be significantly improved in 2025, but there is some concern with the offense as the Cowboys transition from Mike McCarthy to Brian Schottenheimer. I wasn't the biggest fan of this hire and hope to be proven wrong, but I do have a lot of concerns with this team's ceiling and ultimately just how good the offense will be in 2025 due to not only Brian Schottenheimer, but the personnel they have on the offensive side of the ball too. Now, if you are watching this video thinking to yourself that there's been a lot of praise for the Cowboys despite having one big concern with this team, the big concern is the run game. This team finished 30th in yards per carry last year, and whether the quarterback is Dak Prescott, who, as Cowboys fans know, takes a lot of flack from the media, or anybody else, the reality is there's always going to be a ceiling if your team is going to finish 30th in yards per carry as a team, and that's not setting your quarterback up for success. I also have a lot of concerns with the offensive line, really outside of Tyler Smith, and while I do believe in Tyler Booker and especially Cooper Beebe, I really worry about the tackles in Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele, as over the last 2 years, Terrence Steele has allowed a combined 90 plus pressures, as well as had over 13 penalties in over the last 2 years, and that's combined, certainly not in each season, by the way. My concern for the Cowboys entering the 2025 season is entering the year with running backs of Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and Jaden Blue, and hoping that it's going to work out, and I am a firm believer that anytime you enter a year and you are hoping that a position is going to work out, you are already behind the 8 ball and you're fighting an uphill battle from the start. Can Javonte Williams work out and become the player that he was supposed to be coming out of UNC back in 2021? Yes, but unfortunately he's dealt with a fair share of injuries, and if he does, I will be the first to acknowledge that, hey, I was wrong projecting Javonte Williams in 2025, but I think there is a clear ceiling with this football team, and it's going to start with both the run game and ultimately the offensive line, as at this point, I think there's more questions than answers with the Cowboys offense entering the year. While I admittedly do not think Dak Prescott is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, and several others don't either, I do think it's fair to acknowledge that a quarterback leading a team that's going to finish 30th in yards per carry and 32nd in rushing touchdowns, as the 2024 Cowboys had 6 rushing touchdowns over the course of the entire season, I also think it's fair to say that that is setting your quarterback up for failure, whether that player is Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, or whoever. And unfortunately for Dak Prescott, whenever you are not only the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, but whenever you sign a 4-year, $240 million contract and you have the average annual value of your contract be at $60 million per year, which as of now is by far the highest of any player in the NFL, then you are going to be the subject of a lot of criticism, fair or not. I do think it's fair to say that the Dallas Cowboys underperformed in 2024, and Dak Prescott did too. Dak had an MVP caliber year in 2023, and I do think we will see more of that player in 2025, as I think it's going to come down to a lot of the time, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Dak, you guys are the big 3 of the offense, go out and make something happen. If we have to put up 30 plus points in every game to win, then that's what we're going to do, and I do think that there is a very real chance that the Cowboys have not just 1, but 2 1,000-yard receivers in the offense this year, those of course being CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. George Pickens is in a contract year, and George and everyone else for that matter knows if you ball out in the contract year that you are going to receive quite the contract the following offseason. Now, it will be determined whether or not that contract is from Dallas, although I do think Dallas's front office in the grand scheme of things is smarter than they get credit for, and I think there's a very real reality where we have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens be the top two receivers for this franchise for the next couple of years, and like we said, I do think they both go for over 1,000 yards this year, assuming both of those guys and Dak Prescott stay healthy. I also think that Jake Ferguson is a kind of underappreciated tight end. He had a really good 2023 season, and he and pretty much everyone else for that matter had a down 2024 season, and that kind of was what it was. The 2024 Cowboys season, like we said, in a lot of ways is best forgotten. But I think there's a very real reality that Brian Schottenheimer's first year with the Cowboys is going to be a team that finishes top 7 in points per game, and with a quarterback in Dak Prescott that throws for 30 touchdowns yet again, and has two 1,000-yard receivers in Cedarian Lamb and George Pickens. Ultimately, I think this team is going to win anywhere from 9 to 11 games, and at maximum be a divisional round exit. I think they are a very limited team because of the run game and because of the offensive line, but ultimately I would welcome being proven wrong. I also think there are some limitations defensively, specifically at the linebacking and the nickel position, and that in some ways this is a very top-heavy roster. That's all we have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the first team preview of the 2025 offseason, and please like the video and subscribe if you did enjoy, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.